The Gonzaga Bulldogs made $500,000 for finishing second in the Players Era Festival Championship. That's about the only good news after that 40-point massacre at the hands of the Michigan Wolverines.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Thanksgiving and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga Bulldogs podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. Well, Gonzaga got down by 10 in the first 3 minutes against Michigan and genuinely never recovered in what was far and away the worst loss in the Mark Few era at Gonzaga basketball, the worst loss that I can recall for Gonzaga by a long, just in terms of embarrassment, frustration, just continuous waiting for the team to kind of get engaged, and they never were able to do so. 40-point loss to Michigan. They finished second in the Players Era Championship. We're going to break down the game. We're going to talk about what went wrong. We're going to talk about what's next for Gonzaga coming off of this game. And then we're going to close out the show taking a look around the WCC, other games, other teams that were participating in MTEs this weekend, where they're at, what it means for the conference. We'll do that at the end of the show. But we start just with a little bit of a therapy session. We're recording this live about 10 minutes after the conclusion of the game on Wednesday night. Many of you listening to this on Thanksgiving. So it's a tough day to be thankful for Gonzaga basketball in particular. Obviously, a tremendous start to the season, and everything just came crashing down in one just horrendous performance that was ugly pretty much throughout. There was a few times where Gonzaga would string together a couple of good defensive plays, and there were a few times where Gonzaga would string together a couple of good offensive plays, but they never did it consecutively. If there was a time where Gonzaga scored on 3 straight possessions, probably Michigan scored on those same 3 possessions as well. And often Gonzaga would score 3 times down in a row on Braden Huff floaters. They'd score 6 points. Michigan would score 8 points in that same time period. And then there was a stretch late in the first half where Gonzaga did hold Michigan to like 8 points over like a 5-minute stretch, and they barely made a dent in the score because they couldn't score themselves. Just an all-around disastrous performance for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. We'll do the good and the bad like we always do, and then we'll do our 5 keys that we laid out prior to this game and how they ended up playing out in this game on Wednesday night. The good for Gonzaga, honestly, I said it in the cold open as a bit of a joke, but it's not really a joke. The best thing that happened out of this game is that Gonzaga made $500,000. The fact that Gonzaga got into this game and got to compete in the championship, second place gets $500K in NIL money. That's a big deal for Gonzaga. That is it's a big deal for any program, but for a program that doesn't have that $20 million threshold that programs like Michigan and others do, it's important to get NIL money whenever you can. And so it's not the most fun good news to start out a show like this, but there's not a whole lot else of good things that happen in this one. I thought it was good that Gonzaga was able to get playing time for Davis Vogel and Ismaila Diani. Again, the circumstances around why those guys played pretty significant minutes in this game are not good, but it's still good that it happened. And we saw those guys get to kind of struggle playing against, a really good competition. I think that's one of the things in particular in Vogel's case where we've seen so many of the minutes that he's played have been against not good teams, against teams that Gonzaga beat by 50 plus points or 70 plus points like Southern Utah. And so you just don't get a really good handle on a player's kind of where they're currently at when they're playing that kind of competition. And in this game, like Vogel showed some signs of being overmatched a little bit. He then calmed down and hit a really nice mid-range jumper, and he had some good possessions defensively. I'm not trying to criticize him far more than anybody else on this roster. He was genuinely the very least of Gonzaga's problems in this game. I'm just saying it was a good thing that Gonzaga got him on the floor, got him the opportunity to play against high-level athletes, against better players than the backups at Southern Utah and Texas Southern. That is a good thing for Gonzaga and a good thing for Davis Vogel, and the same is true for Ismaila Diani. Vogel finished with 2 points, a steal, and 3 turnovers. Diani finished with a point, 5 boards, and an assist, but he was 1 of 4 from the free throw line. A couple other good things we saw in this game. I like the offensive aggressiveness from Emmanuel Nicente that continued. He had a couple of points, back-to-back possessions, I think, in the first half. Didn't score outside of that, but again, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel to find good things that happen in this game for Gonzaga. Braeden Smith, another strong performance from him. He only scored 2 points, but he had 7 assists and 0 turnovers. That's in a game that Gonzaga scored 61 points. For the backup point guard, I mean, I would venture a guess, and I'm not going to do the research on this because I don't have hours and hours and hours of time, but I would imagine that in games where Gonzaga scores less than 65 points, their backup point guard having a 7-0 assist to turnover ratio, there's a pretty good chance that has never happened. That's a pretty unusual thing to have happened in this game. So big shout out to Braden Smith. He didn't score the ball particularly well. I think he only had 2 points on 1 of 4 shooting, I think is what it was, but he has never been somebody who takes a lot of shots. He's looking to get his teammates open. And in a game where very few people were effective on either side of the ball, Braden Smith was effective at doing what his job is on this team. And Braden Huff played pretty well. He fouled out of this game. So did Jalen Worley in the second half. He picked up 2 fouls like immediately when the second half started. The refs, I think, called 6 fouls in the first 2.5 minutes of the second half, which sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. That is how the game was officiated. For whatever reason, they just really tightened it up in the second half. But Huff had 14.6 boards. He was 7 of 17 overall, 7 of 14 on 2-pointers. They kind of figured out that Mara was going under those screens because he basically just stood right underneath the basket the whole game. And Gonzaga figured out that Huff could hit that little lefty floater push shot. And that was kind of the only offense that ever really worked for Gonzaga in this game until the second half, in particular when they kind of just let Tyon Grant-Foster go to work, and he was able to do that effectively. The only other good thing I have in my notes was when Jalen Worley blocked a Demara. That was my favorite play of the game. He got up, 7'3" guy, thought he had an easy lay-in. Worley clean block off the backboard. That was great. That was fun. Not a lot of other fun things that happened in this basketball game. The bad was everything. I mean, we don't have time to get into everything that was not good in this game. But if I didn't mention it in the good, it was bad. That's the easiest way to look at this game. The Zags shot 32% from the field, not from 3. That would be pretty good for them from 3. 32% from the field. They shot 42% on 2-pointers. Yesterday against Maryland, they shot 74% on 2-pointers. Obviously, we knew Michigan was going to be elite. For those who missed the pregame show, Michigan is holding opponents to 35% on 2-pointers this season. So if you can believe it, having watched this basketball game, Gonzaga's 2-point field goal percentage in this game was better than what teams have averaged against Michigan this year. That is terrifying if you are somebody who is still on Michigan's schedule, or if you are somebody in the Big Ten, that they are that good defensively. The Zags also shot 14% from 3. We'll talk more about that in the second segment, but woof, that has not been an area of strength outside of one game, and we were hoping the momentum would continue. It did not. Graham Ike had the worst game he's ever had in a Gonzaga uniform. I'm recording this live, but if they're talking to him after the game, he would also tell you that. It's not really up for debate. He scored 1 point. He scored 1 point in this game, and it was on a flagrant foul free throw. The only point that Graham Ike scored. Gonzaga's preseason All-American, the most important player on a team that will still be in the top 10 next week, even after this loss. He had 1 point. He did not make a field goal, 0 of 9 from the field in this game. Just a horrendously off night for Graham, and the worst time for it to happen. Some of them were good looks that he just couldn't knock down. Some of them were highly contested shots because Demar is 7'3", and Yaxel Lindenberg is 6'10", and Morris Johnson Jr. is 6'10", and they just have a ton of size and length, and Gonzaga really struggled with that. And then on the defensive end of the floor, they just could not stop Michigan. And a huge shout out to Michigan, by the way. This team looked incredible. They looked incredible. The amount of times they shot 60%, and it'd be easy to look at the box score or just look at the score and think, man, Gonzaga must have played terrible defense. Obviously, at times their defense was bad, but if you watch the first half of this game in particular, when the Zags were still fighting really hard, there were so many of Michigan's shots were highly contested, and they just buried them. Elliot Cadeau, who was the crappy 3-point shooter at North Carolina, is burying NBA threes in the first half of this game. It was just that kind of night. It was just that kind of night for Michigan and for Gonzaga. And I think the best thing you can hope at this point is that Gonzaga just got it all out of their system. this is what I texted a couple of people kind of during and after the game. I would rather you just have an absolute clunker where everything goes to hell than have like the same persistent issues multiple times. Like, as much as this really stings right now, I would rather Gonzaga beat the doors off of teams for 3 straight weeks like they did, and then just have all of the things that could go wrong in a game, offensively, defensively, everything just happen all at once. Last year, it kind of bled out in multiple games. They would have a game where they'd play okay, but not great, and then lose by 3 to UCLA. They'd have a game where they'd play good for a half, bad for a second half, lose in overtime to Kentucky. They'd have a game where most things would go wrong, but a few things would go okay, and they'd lose in overtime to West Virginia. I would rather have this, where Gonzaga, most games, everything goes right, and they just blast teams. And then one game, everything goes to hell, and you lose by 40. Like, I don't want to lose by 40 ever again. It does not feel good, but it goes down as the same number of losses as any other game would. And yes, obviously from a metrics perspective, it's not good to get beat by 40. Gonzaga is going to be able to withstand the metrics. Like, this is not going to kill them in the metrics because of how good they already are and how dominant they have been before this, as long as they don't let this become any kind of pattern or trend or anything like that, which is very, very unlikely to happen. Which leads to the final thing I'm going to say before we get into the keys in this game, which is, this is just a game you flush. Like, you learn from it. Obviously, you're going to watch the tape. Like, I'm not saying you just ignore it, but you kind of just flush it. You kind of just say, you know what? That was awful. Let's wallow in this for a day or two. Let's watch the film, and then let's move on. And let's get ready for Kentucky, because we got 9 days off. And if we just sit and stew in this loss for 9 days, that's not going to serve any of us going forward. Take a day, take 2 days, deal with this game, watch the tape, figure out what went wrong, and then move on and get ready for Kentucky, because you still got it. You still got games to play. And again, a 1-point loss or a 40-point loss, it's still just one loss in that column. And you want to make sure that there's not too many more of those between now and March. Well, folks, like we said, outside shooting remains a massive issue for Gonzaga, especially when Ike has an off night like he did tonight. We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, college basketball and the NBA are back, and there's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And even if you missed the start of a game, or if you just want to ride out the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to predicting those fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay to get a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's the one making that late push. Gonzaga's odds to win the WCC, they dropped a little bit, even though St. Mary's struggled with Wichita State. We'll talk about that later in the show. But Gonzaga's still minus 290 to win the West Coast Conference. St. Mary's is next at plus 300. And right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still the #1 sports podcasting network. And of course, we are still talking about Gonzaga's disastrous, frustrating, shocking in many ways 40-point loss at the hands of the Michigan Wolverines, who have won the second annual Players Era Festival Championship after defeating San Diego State by 40 points, Auburn by 30 points, and then Gonzaga by 40 points. It's one of the most dominant 3-day stretches I have ever seen from any college basketball team ever. And certainly, again, hats off to Michigan for what they were able to do in this game. We laid out our 5 keys that we needed to see Gonzaga do in order to get a victory here. Considering what happened in the game, you can probably guess that these were not things that went well for Gonzaga on Wednesday night. Key number 1 was we wanted to see Gonzaga continue to pound the ball down low. And what we talked about in the preseason or the pregame show was, do not be afraid of Gonzaga's front court. Do not be of Michigan's front court. Do not be afraid of Ade Mara. Do not be afraid of Morris Johnson Jr., Yaxel Lendeberg, and kind of get timid and hesitant and afraid to kind of attack them down at the rim. And they kind of did. That kind of became an issue. I mean, and the Zags shot very poorly in this game. Like we said, 42% on 2-pointers. They missed 32-point shots in this game, 22 of 52. But outside of that kind of run in the middle of the first half when they really did a good job of getting Braden Huff that ball kind of a step in from the free throw line, Gonzaga struggled here. They did attempt to get the ball down low, and Michigan, again, credit to them defensively. They had swarming defense on Ike or Braden whenever they touch the ball down low, and they just have so much length that even when they're just standing there with their arms up, it's tough to score around them. Gonzaga did attempt to do that for a while, but Michigan also kind of let Gonzaga's bigs shoot, which I'm not surprised. Again, Ade Mara basically parked himself under the rim the entire game, and so that's why you saw Graham Ike take 4 threes. That's why you saw Braden Huff take 4 threes. And I was kind of split on this because on one hand, if you'd made a few of those early threes, like Graham did against Creighton or like Braden did against Maryland, that might have forced Michigan to alter their defense to bring Mara out away from the rim, and that could have opened up everything. Then you can have Tyon Grant-Foster driving more, easily to the rim, and it would have changed everything. So I don't think it was a bad thing that Gonzaga was shooting those threes with their bigs, because again, establishing that outside shot can really change things. But they couldn't make them. They couldn't make the shots, and Michigan continued to live with letting those guys shoot those threes and packing the paint. And again, Graham Ike didn't make a single shot in this game. And Braden Huff, he had 14 points, but he still missed 7 2-point shots. That's pretty bad for him. Just a really rough game from those two guys, from Gonzaga's front court overall, and in particularly, of course, from Ike. Key number 2 coming into this game was we wanted to see Gonzaga stay hot from 3. They had a phenomenal 3-point shooting game against Maryland, 14 of 32 in that game. And it was they had not made more than 9 threes in a game all season. They made 9 in the first half against Maryland. And we kind of were hoping maybe we'll see some momentum. Nope. 3 of 22. 3 of 22 from 3 in this game. That's 14%. So about 3 times less than what they shot, exactly 3 times less than what they shot against Maryland. Mario, Tyon, and Adam Miller were the only 3 players to make a 3. All 3 of them went 1 of 3 in this game. Venters and Ike each went 0 of 4. Huff went 0 of 3, like we said. Just a really rough 3-point shooting night. Steele Venters had shot it really well. I think he was 4 of 8 and 4 of 7 in the first 2 games of Players Era Festival, and he didn't bring it here. He didn't have it. 0 of 4 in this game for him. Really needed his offense, really needed his floor spacing, and just didn't get it. I thought the Zags I felt encouraged because Adam Miller hit his first shot of the game, which was an early 3, and that doesn't happen very often. And I was like, oh, Miller hit his first shot. Like maybe there's going to be some momentum there. And it never happened. It never happened for Gonzaga. Again, a lot of this is the length of Michigan defensively, but really, Graham Ike is probably not going to have any more 1-point games. But he's not going to be his best every single game. And if the 3-point shot is not there for Gonzaga, that's going to be an issue. It's going to cause them problems. They have to get this figured out. It's late November. There's plenty of time, but the Zags have had 1 good game shooting the 3. That is it. That's going to need to change for them to be a true national championship contender. Number 3 in our keys to this game were good play from the point guards. I already mentioned Braeden Smith. 7 assists, 0 turnovers, 2 rebounds, 2 points. Really strong game from him. 17 minutes. I liked what we saw from him. He was good defensively. He was active. He was good with the ball in his hands. Pushed the pace, but slowed it down. Made good reads. Had a lot of those passes to Huff for those easy shots. Mario struggled a little bit more, but it still wasn't an awful night. He didn't shoot it well, but nobody on Gonzaga's team shot it well. He was 2 of 9, 1 of 3 from 3, but he still had 6 assists. He had 2 steals. He had 3 rebounds. He was very active defensively. Like you see that there's still some growth for him, still some areas that he's improving on as he's adjusting to college basketball. But I didn't think that either of these guys played poorly. They combined for 13 assists in the game, and I think Mario had 1 turnover. So these 2 guys combined for 13 assists and 1 turnover. That's really good. That's really, really good in a game where Gonzaga was just absolute doo-doo in pretty much every other way. Shout out to those 2 guys for playing well. And again, the scoring wasn't there, and you do want more scoring, particularly from Mario. But in a game where the Zags scored 61 points, they were hardly the issue. Number 4 for Gonzaga, we wanted to see them force some turnovers. Michigan had some pretty significant turnover issues early in the year, but they tightened that up in all 3 of these games in Vegas. They did not struggle with turnovers, and they ended up with 13 turnovers in this game. 4 of them were in the first half, though. So they had 9 turnovers in the second half when the game was pretty much entirely when Michigan was up by 20-plus points the entire second half. So the turnovers at that point didn't have as much relevance on the actual impact on this game the way that they did in the first half. And again, 4 turnovers in the first half. 2 of them in the first 10 minutes. One of them was Nimari Burnett just tripping on nothing. So Gonzaga did not really do a good job of forcing turnovers. They got some late in the game, like we said, often at times when Michigan was trying to be too fancy and trying to throw alley-oops and stuff like that because they were up by 30 points and they were celebrating a lot because of that. And so, those turnovers don't really count in the same way that they would had they been happening earlier in the game. So another area where Gonzaga just was not able to get this team to cough the ball up and was not able to capitalize nearly enough when they did do so. And then key number 5, one of the only other positive things, which I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention here, let Tyon cook. I thought Tyon was going to be an impactful, important player for Gonzaga in this game. And he was in the sense. He was tied for Gonzaga's leading scorer with Braden Huff. He had 14 points in this game. He was 5 of 10 on his 2-point attempts. He was 1 of 3 from 3. He was just 1 of 3 from the free throw line because he continues to not be impactful in that space. But he had 8 rebounds, 3 steals, a solid game from Tyon Grant-Foster. And when Gonzaga's offense just was completely flat, when Graham wasn't delivering, when Braden was in foul trouble, they went to Tyon. And they kind of went to Tyon in a, hey, just get him the ball and let him go to work. And he hit mid-range shots. He drove all the way to the rim and scored that way. He hit little floaters over Ade Mara. Like, his offensive bag is incredibly versatile and crucial for Gonzaga. He is that guy. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it more this year of, like, you need a guy who can just go get a bucket. Tyon Grant-Foster is that guy. And he didn't do it in a super efficient clip in this game, but this is one of, if not the best defensive team that Tyon and Gonzaga are going to face this year. And he still had 14 points on 6 of 13 shooting. Again, not great, but also not awful. Not awful. Like, that's really not that bad. And do that with 8 rebounds in a game where he didn't play as many minutes as typical because by the end of the game, Gonzaga was just kind of rotating in different guys. I thought he was very good in this game, and they're going to need him to be. Again, Graham's not going to have any more 1-point games. I feel pretty confident in saying that. But when he struggles, or even when he doesn't, you're going to need offensive impact from Tyon Grant-Foster. And in a game where very few players delivered, Tyon was one of those bright spots for the Zags on both ends of the floor, but particularly on offense. Well, I said that Gonzaga just needs to flush this game, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to close out the show. We will talk more about this game. We got 9 days between now and Gonzaga's next game, so I'm sure it's going to come up again, folks. But for right now, we're going to move on. We're going to look at the rest of the WCC, what they have done, what other teams have done in this MTE Feast Week time period here for college basketball. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, today's episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little bit easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to your door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. The quality of Omaha Steaks is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking so much easier. And the variety is very underrated. Steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those things that truly fits anyone. And honestly, it's the kind of gift that brings people together. And best of all, you don't have to guess anybody's size. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE, terms apply. See site for details. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked on Zags podcast, and we are closing out the show, moving away from Gonzaga's 40-point loss to the Michigan Wolverines. Like we said, the only real positive is that Gonzaga still got themselves a nice hefty 6-figure check for finishing second in the Players Era Festival, $500K towards NIL money. But man, there wasn't a whole lot else to celebrate. And we didn't mention this. I'm going to mention it here before we get into the WCC stuff. 3 games in 3 days is hard. And I was hesitant to mention that because it's not an excuse. It's very obviously not a logical excuse because guess what? Michigan also played 3 games in 3 days, and it didn't seem to bother them whatsoever. But it is tough. And you saw that kind of fatigue and just challenge that some of the players went through. And one of the issues that people have brought up about Mark Few and Gonzaga in the past is a bit of an unwillingness to play the depth. And we're in November. In March, the criticisms of coaching decisions will be much stronger because you got to win at that point. Now it's like, well, this game was felt out of hand very early on. So at that point, I think you kind of change the way you coach the game a little bit. But I'm hopeful. And again, I did mention this a little bit earlier with Ismail Diani and Davis Fogel playing, 8 to 10-ish minutes in this game. Like, you don't need those guys to play every single night this year, and they won't. I feel pretty confident about that, barring an injury or anything like that. But you need them to be ready. And I think it's important that they got playing time in this game, but I think it's also a reminder of like, hey, like, your depth is only good if you use it. And Mark Few can have the deepest roster he's ever had, but if he's only playing 7 guys and they're getting gassed in the NCAA tournament, that deserves significant criticism. This game in particular, in the NCAA tournament, you never play 3-3. Like, that is unusual. That is not something you see outside of these specific MTEs. And having to play a very physical and very athletic Michigan team on day 3 is tough. Again, Michigan had to deal with a very aggressive, physical, fast Gonzaga team, and they beat the doors off them. So it's not, it doesn't work necessarily as an excuse, but I do hope that this is something that Mark Few and Gonzaga will look at of like, hey, what can we do to make sure that we are fresher, that we are more prepared when you're in the tournament and you're playing, 2 games in 3 days, or whatever it may end up looking like, or in the WCC tournament. Obviously, Gonzaga will hopefully only have to play 2 days there, but still something that I think, is a potential thing the staff and Gonzaga can kind of learn from this game and hope to have that depth fully ready to go when they really need them in March. All right, on to the WCC. Multiple other teams taking place in some kind of MTE or event. And I say multiple, every other WCC team is doing something. St. Mary's playing in the Battle for Atlantis. We'll start with them. That event is ongoing. In fact, it started on Wednesday. The Gales' first game was against Wichita State. Not pretty, but they got a W 70-65. Paulus Morauskas 20-9 for him. The Gales won despite shooting a abysmal 2 of 16 from 3. I'd laugh at them, but that Gonzaga didn't shoot a whole lot better than that. And of course, St. Mary's got the W, even if it was against Wichita State. They will now take on Virginia Tech on Thanksgiving at 11:30 a.m. If you're somebody who either doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving or celebrates Thanksgiving by watching basketball, I would tune into this one. Neo Avdilas, very fun player for the Virginia Tech Hokies, a former pursuit of Gonzaga on the international market. And you get to see the Gales and how they're looking this year. Next up, Washington State in the Maui Invitational. They finished 3rd as that event wrapped up on Wednesday. Not a bad result for Wazoo, almost a disastrous result for Wazoo because they beat Chaminade, which is the host school that's in this event every other year. They are a non-Division I school, and Wazoo was down. Like, they're down 27-13. Then they built up like a 20-point lead, and then Chaminade got it all the way within single digits before Wazoo finally picked up a W. Near disaster class for David Riley and the Cougs. They then lose to Mo Odom and Arizona State 100-94 in a very high octane game that Bill Walton, my God, he would have loved every single part of that basketball game. But Wazoo falls in that one. They face Seton Hall in the 3rd place game, lose 75-61. Wazoo now 3-5 on the year. They were 137th to begin the season at KenPom. They're now 162nd. Rough start to the season for David Riley and the Cougs. Speaking of rough starts, the other former Pac-12 school in the WCC, Oregon State, they participated in an event called the Paradise Jam, and they were awful. 0-3 in the event. A big storyline for Wayne Tinkle and Oregon State coming into the year was last year they were great at Gill Coliseum, their home arena. They were bad everywhere else. Hopeful that would change this year. Well, they're 3-4 on the year. They have won 3 games at home. They have lost every game they have played other than Corvallis this year. They lost by 4 to Evansville, who's 306th at KenPom. Yikes. They lost by 7 to Iona in overtime, who's 186th. And they lost by 8 to UMass, who's 189th. They have now fallen from 129th to 190th. At KenPom. So they and Wazoo both started within 8 spots of each other. And while Wazoo's gotten more attention for being bad this year, Oregon State is now 28 spots below them at KenPom. Those 2 schools not at all delivering in their final season in the West Coast Conference. 4 other schools participated in the Acrisure event, which is a lot of those games were held on campuses, but it is a sponsored event. Two of them have not played yet. Thanksgiving, we'll have Santa Clara taking on St. Louis and San Francisco taking on Colorado. Very excited for both these games. USF versus Colorado is at 11 Eastern time on the CBS Sports Network. Curious to see if the Dons can get a W against a power conference team after already defeating Minnesota last week. And then Santa Clara versus St. Louis, 7 Eastern time on CBS Sports Network as well. Two of the best mid-major programs in college basketball. Santa Clara is playing great. Their NCAA tournament resume gets a big boost if they beat St. Louis and Robbie Avila's team. So excited to see how that one shakes out. San Diego also played an Acrisure event and lost to Cal Baptist by 15 because San Diego, as much as we hoped, as much as we thought, hey, they had the best transfer portal class they've ever gotten. They have real money. They invested in their program. They invested in their facilities. Steve Lavin was geeked and excited before the season at Media Day about how much money they've pumped into the program, how much talent they brought in via the transfer portal and the international market, and it has not gone well. It has not gone well. They have fallen from 174th to 253rd at KenPom after a 3-3 start to the season, and they got walloped by Cal Baptist by 15 points. Not good things for the Toreros. Also, Pepperdine played on Wednesday and had one of the weirdest box scores that I have ever seen. They were up 7 points at halftime, and they lost to Fresno State by 23. They got absolutely walloped in this game. At one point in the second half, they were being outscored by Fresno State 40-6. Just horrendous stuff from Pepperdine. Not a good game from them. Not a good season at this point for the Waves, them in San Diego. I was hopeful that maybe things would start picking up for them, but it has not happened yet. LMU and Pacific both participated in the Sunshine Slam. Pacific first game was at FAU, and they got smoked, but they turned around, beat Stony Brook, beat Jacksonville, each by 15-plus points. They are actually one of the few teams that has risen at KenPom since the season started. They're 136th now. LMU also lost to FAU, which is coached by John Jackas, a former director of ops for Gonzaga, and one of their assistant coaches is former Zaga guard Eric McClellan. So he's pretty used to beating LMU and Pacific and got it done for them this year. LMU lost that game by 11, turned around and beat Ohio by 12. The Lions are now 7-1 on the year. Very strong start to the season for LMU, but that loss to FAU certainly hurts them going forward. The Portland Pilots hosted the Portland Invitational. They basically just brought 3 different teams to the Chiles Center for a little 4-team MTE. They beat the first team they played, Cal State Fullerton. They dropped 103 points on Cal State Fullerton, but then lost in overtime to Northern Colorado by 6 and then lost to St. Thomas by 10. Pilots now 4-3 on the year, but getting pretty close to being outside the top 300 at KenPom. And then Seattle U has yet to play in Feast Week. Their game is on Friday. They're taking on a soon-to-be Pac-12 foe of Gonzaga's, the Texas State Bobcats. That game will be on Friday at 11 a.m. at the Resorts World Casino in Las Vegas. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today. Not the most fun day, but again, I am thankful for all of you. I am thankful for those of you who are here live, listening to us about an hour or so after the game ended. I am thankful for those of you listening on Thanksgiving or those of you listening after Thanksgiving. I appreciate every single one of you. I've loved doing this show for now 4 years and look forward to it. I'll admit happily that I love doing the show a lot more when we're live 10 minutes after a win than 10 minutes after a 40-point loss. But hey, that is, you take the good with the bad. It doesn't happen very often to Gonzaga, and I know that Mark Few will have this team ready to roll for Kentucky on December 5th. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, and especially on a day like today, we say go Zags.